This weekend, a new serial killer film starring Nicolas Cage drops in theaters. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share, what did you think about Longlegs, or what's your excitement level for it? Now, this is one of these movies that feels like it kind of came out of nowhere, but is getting a ton of momentum, where it didn't have this gigantic marketing push, but they marketed it right. And the right people saw it early that have been spreading the buzz and the word around it, that it just has fantastic word of mouth that has this grassroots momentum growing behind it. So there's a bunch of showings that are like selling out for this movie. I was actually able to sit down with the director and writer of the film, Osgood Perkins, yesterday. I'll be kind of incorporating segments of that interview into the review. But even while I was setting up my cameras, he was checking his phone about pre-sale tickets, and he was just sitting there kind of in shock at how well the movie was selling, because it's a small indie horror film that looks like it's gonna do really, really well. It's already being widely received, or well received, by critics. It had a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes up until very, very recently, so I was excited to check it out. What did I think about it? Let's get started with the good. And right off the bat, the thing that I enjoyed about the film is that it's essentially a throwback serial killer film. So I grew up in the 90s, and back then there were a lot of great serial killer films. Of course, Silence of the Lambs and Seven, but there were all sorts of other mid-tier serial killer films in there as well, a lot of the Alex Cross films and more. And this felt like a throwback to that era. The way that we talk about throwback action films, this is a throwback serial killer film. I actually talked with Osgood about that specific point during our interview.
I kind of felt like it'd be a fun trick in a way to just pretend like it was going to be Silence of the Lambs, like just like fake it for a minute and to kind of be like, oh, you know, it's Silence of the Lambs, audience. Like you feel comfortable with that. You know what that's like. You know what to expect from that. And to kind of do that for a while and then take a really sharp left turn. So once I kind of had that plan in mind, it began to take shape. I mean, it was meant almost to be sort of a almost a pop art look at those things, to sort of reference them directly, to actually take scenes and story points directly out of those movies. And it's meant to be a move that they did. I'm not trying to pretend like I came up with that idea. I'm actually trying to pretend like I didn't come up with that idea, that I'm referencing another serial killer movie.
And what it does so well is pay homage to a bunch of different films. It doesn't copy any one movie in its entirety, but it takes inspiration from a bunch of different sources. It pulls some new things in, and so it feels familiar in a sense while being fresh and new at the exact same time. Even when it leans into something that is very much from one of these movies from the 90s, it finds a way to kind of turn it on its head and do something entirely different with that plot point. Now, one of the big hooks with this film is that you do have Nicolas Cage playing the serial killer in this film, and he is just so famous for these big iconic performances where he just absolutely goes for it. And in this movie, he's given an ultra creepy serial killer, which right off the bat you go, oh, Nicolas Cage is a serial killer? That's going to be wild. And it is. And so you get the performance, but also he's in makeup that's just really, really unsettling just to see him. This is another area where I was able to talk with the director about where the character came from, how much was on the script, and how much came from Nicolas Cage.
The great thing about Nick is that he lives to be in service of the text, right? So he signed on to my movie. I don't know how it goes for other people, but he signed on to my movie because he loved the script, he loved the words, and he didn't want to change any of them. And so everything that Nicolas Cage says in the movie is something that I wrote. It was in the draft when he got it. We didn't add a lot of things. We didn't take away a lot of things. I offered to him, man, you can say whatever you want. You can riff, you can improvise, you can throw the script out. I don't care. And his really, really refreshing and confidence-building answer for me was, oh, no, I want to do everything as you wrote it. So, you know, the truth is that most of it is written. Most of it is there as a text, and that the good news is that Cage is not there to service himself. He's there to service the project.
It's kind of fascinating to hear that after having seen the film, because it's such a Nicolas Cage character. But It wasn't written specifically for Nicolas Cage, and it wasn't rewritten by Nicolas Cage. It was him taking someone else's work and making it his own, and so it's true to both of them. The other thing about the movie that I thought was just handled so well was the use of framing, negative space, and sound design to create this constant sense of unease in the audience, where characters are almost always perfectly centered in the frame, and it's shot with these wide-angle lenses so you can see so much of what's going on all around them, and then the sound design kind of fills in little gaps, and it's composed in such a way to cause the audience to start filling in the gaps and imagining what's going on all around you. And so you're just sitting there in this sense of unease with the same tension that the characters feel in those moments. There's all these times where you're just watching something, waiting for something to happen. A shot lingers just a little bit too long and you're not sure if you're gonna have this bump, this jump, this surprise, this jump scare happen. And so you're constantly on the edge of your seat because of the way the shots are composed. And whether something happens or doesn't happen, it evokes the same sense of anticipation for the danger, for the scare. Very effectively done. So once again, I talked with the director about this, and he discussed some of his influences and where that came from.
I mean, it's the Stanley Kubrick thing, right? Like The Shining does that over and over and over again. And Kubrick's use of lenses, I think that's something that filmmakers probably, certainly myself as a younger person, noticed right away, is the use of wide-angle lenses, really wide-angle lenses, 16s and 18s and 14s and things, create that weird distance and that weird sort of warped sense of space, and the kind of uneasiness that comes with that. The off-balance way of looking at the world through such a wide lens really does put you in an off spot.
And there really is this sense of disorientation all throughout the entire movie, even the way that some of the credits play, the angles that are shot, the way things that are cut. You understand what's happening. You're not confused, but they're shot, put on screen in a way that just makes you feel off all throughout the entire movie. Another thing the movie does well is it is an investigation film where there's a lot of information that needs to be communicated. There's a lot of backstory. There's a lot of times where we're looking at files and all sorts of things like this. And where it could feel like this exposition dump, they've found a way to kind of layer voiceover with images, with backstory, with shots of kind of what characters are thinking about to always make it dynamic and interesting. Even at the points in time where it could slow down, it never really does. Like, it's a movie that moves at a very deliberate pace, but at just the right amount of time, it throws something in that always breaks what could be monotony, could be a slow pace. It's always shaken up just enough, or information is communicated in just an interesting enough way to always keep it moving forward. Another thing that it did really well is that it is very much this grounded FBI procedural about this investigation, but there are supernatural elements in the story, kind of all throughout the movie, but it does escalate as it goes along. And he was able to find just the right place to where it never feels like we're jumping from the grounded to the fantastical. And it's able very early on, when things are very much set in a world like our own, it feels like reality, but it makes these larger-than-life fantastical elements feel believable. Final thing to talk about, the movie kind of has a lot of different characters, plot points, things that are introduced, and as you approach the finale, it really does feel like it pulls them all together. And there's little details all throughout the movie where it mentions birthdays and parties and dates and different characters, and you can feel like, oh, these threads are all going to kind of come together at some point in time, and the movie finds a way to absolutely pull it together where you feel this crescendo of plot lines, of emotion, of arcs, of tension and danger. It kind of all erupts at the end of the film in a satisfying way. When you put it all together, it does a great job of reminding you of a bunch of classic serial killer films, but also bringing a lot of new stuff to the table in the way that it creates tension with the camera work, with the way that it incorporates supernatural elements into a grounded story. So it feels familiar, but it's also wholly fresh, new, and it's a great new entry in the genre. There's a couple things in here that I wasn't quite as excited about, so let's move on to the bad. Since I think the movie's great, I don't have a whole lot to say here, but as you kind of move into the back half of the film and it starts kind of pulling all the pieces together, doing its final twists and reveals, there's a couple things that happen. I was like, I'm not fully there. I'm not completely buying into it. I don't love this as much as I loved the build-up. The intrigue was maybe better than the answer in a few places. There's a couple things that are revealed where you kind of go, yeah, I kind of expected that to happen. Some of it I think was intentionally designed to be pretty obvious. Some of it felt maybe a little bit too familiar at times because it is playing homage to certain things that you can kind of see where it's going in advance. And then just in general, when you're doing a movie that's designed to be an homage film, that is intentionally calling back to classics, you call comparisons and, is this going to be a classic for the decades like Silence of the Lambs or Seven? Probably not. But will it be one of the best horror films of the year? I think that is pretty well a lock and a guarantee at this point in time. Now, if it's not, man, it means we're going to have an awesome back half of the year when it comes to horror. But this is a very good horror film that I'm glad that we're getting another great serial killer film like this. Real quick, before I give you my final thoughts, remember to join me down below in the comment section. Let me know, what did you think about Longlegs? Did it live up to the hype? Also, I have covered Seven as well as the Hannibal Lecter films before, so if you're into serial killer movies, want to know my thoughts on them, I'll have links somewhere around here to where I talked about them. Also, I will be posting my full interview with the director tomorrow or Friday. Normally, with these types of interviews, you only get like 5 or 6 minutes total in the room with the talent. They allowed me to go in, set up a couple cameras and microphones, do a full 10-minute interview, and then tear all of my stuff down. So I was very appreciative for their generosity with their time. Overall, I thought this was a highly effective serial killer film that calls back to a different era. It plays homage to a bunch of the best films of the genre while bringing a bunch of new techniques to the table, telling a different type of story and putting you on the edge of your seat in brand new ways. If you like serial killer films, if you're a horror fan, you want to check out this film. Overall, it's an A-. It's an 8.5 out of 10 on the entertainment scale, and you should go see this film. Support it in the theater if you like this type of film. Tell Hollywood we want more of this. You can check out my other coverage of serial killer films right around here. Come back for that interview in a couple of days, and thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.